will bring you all the developments on the investigation as it continues. But we head now to Europe, and Russia and Ukraine have carried out another round of prisoner exchanges, but this time it's the bodies of fallen soldiers that were returned. Kyiv says it has received 1,200 bodies of dead Ukrainian troops from Moscow as part of an earlier agreement struck in Istanbul. However, Russia claims it hasn't yet received any of its dead bodies in return. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says prisoner of war swaps will continue until June the 21st, with possible peace talks to follow. On the front line, Zelensky claims Ukraine has halted Russia's advance into northeastern Sumy regions. Battles are now raging along the border, with Russia's maximum advance restricted to 7 kilometers. Meanwhile, Russia claims to have captured Zeleny Kut in eastern Ukraine and destroyed over 100 Ukrainian drones in the past 24 hours. Zelensky admits Ukraine may not be able to regain all lost territory through force and is calling for stronger sanctions to pressure Moscow back to the negotiating table. Well, joining us to discuss the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict is Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and vice dean at the Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much, Professor Popovsky, for being here with us. Let's first look at this prisoner exchange of dead bodies. Russia say they haven't received theirs. Ukraine say that 1,200 have been returned. Is this a normal situation to occur, or is this situation in the first place common, the trade of dead bodies in wartime?
It is very common under international humanitarian law, under the Geneva Convention, to do that. Nothing surprising. It's humanitarian, but it's also military purpose here. Exchanging prisoners of war when they are alive obviously is required. The protection of prisoners of war is also required exactly because we, one side of the conflict, doesn't want our boys to be mistreated. In other words, there is a humanitarian aspect of that, but also a military aspect of that, and that's probably what makes the international humanitarian law strong, because both humanitarian and military purpose are achieved by exchanges as protection as well of the prisoners of war. Nothing surprising. Those will continue, and I'm sure they will continue even beyond 21st of June. There is a goodwill on both sides, which is probably something encouraging finally to see. But that happens, Joshua, in every armed conflict, even between the worst enemy in the past, during the Second World War, in many other conflicts. In Israel and Gaza, we also see prisoners exchange. So there is nothing surprising, and it's a good news, at least for the family of those who can return alive.
Yes, Volodymyr Zelensky says that fighting has been raging on and that his forces have been able to repel Russian advances to only 7 kilometers in recent times. But then he does say on the flip side that without support, without sanctions, Ukrainian troops may not be able to hold out for too much longer. Do you think this is a show of strength in one comment, but also an acknowledgement that more support is needed and a further move to place pressure on Russia from the geopolitical community that is now also facing a potential Middle Eastern conflict that could have wider repercussions as well?
You're absolutely right, Joshua, here. Yes, that's exactly how I read what Zelensky said. These are brave and courageous soldiers. The Ukrainian army does what is best to do. They're absolutely determined to liberate their territories. On another hand, obviously, as you say, part of this statement is to encourage countries around the world to help. Basically, Ukraine is the victim of this war. They need more help, as you say, both in terms of sanctions on Russia, but also in terms of direct support to Ukraine, including military and financial and other support. We will hear those messages from Ukraine. They need more support. Unfortunately, United States under the Trump administration, as we see already for the last 5 months, is unwilling to continue what the previous administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did, which was unequivocal support for Ukraine and strong sanctions on Russia. The hope is that the US administration will also realize that there is no other way out of this tragedy apart from what European and other allies do. Support for Ukraine and sanctions on Russia, and also no negotiations with the aggressor. We see that any attempt to negotiate with Vladimir Putin so far have failed. Russia does not want to negotiate here. Russia does want to kill more civilians in Ukraine. It's so simple. And for that matter, negotiations with Russia do not produce anything, apart from, as we mentioned earlier, prisoners exchange. That's probably the only cooperation we have seen from Russia, is to exchange prisoners of war. Rather, they should also stop the fighting. We don't see any cooperation on any proposal on ceasefire made repeatedly, including by the US administration. Donald Trump is very disappointed by the refusal of Russia to accept even 30 days ceasefire, which was proposed a long time ago already.
Yes. Sorry to interject briefly there, Professor Popovsky. We are running shorter on time, but I do have one final question. We only have around a minute to go. Given the level of escalation that we've seen in the Middle East, do you think there could be any ramifications on the Russia-Ukraine war, given that potential military support might need to be provided if a regional conflict breaks out, and also the spotlight now potentially taken away from this European conflict with the level of loss of life that we might be seeing in the Middle East if it continues to escalate further?
What I would like to see is to recognition that Russia and Iran are absolutely similar countries. They are totalitarian countries with no human rights, with no respect for human lives, and for that matter, they should be treated as allies in those wars. So in a way, Ukraine and Israel are the victims here, and Iran and Russia are the aggressors here. And I think most of the countries in the world are very much aligned with that way of thinking. Yes, it's unfortunate to see what happened between Israel and Iran. And again, there was a huge blunder from the United States when they stopped the delivery of 20,000, I think, weaponry to Ukraine, but they put those into the hands of the Israel army, where Ukrainian desperately needs those ammunitions. The two are connected, as I said, mostly because Russia and Ukraine are allies here, and that's why the rest of the world should support Ukraine and Israel.
Professor Veselin,